So athletes recover, especially the elite athletes. They're already doing this stuff, but maybe not all our athletes are. Whereas if you ask your general population what recovery consists of, they're basically saying maybe a day off. And what I'm going to kind of explain is that may actually be just as bad as not taking a day off at all. So what is recovery? So recovery is basically the act of becoming healthy after an injury or illness, but it's also the act of basically returning back to normal or back to homeostasis after a point of demand on the body. So what are we recovering from for the most part? Stress. All right. Now, stress can be a lot of different things. Anything that you do could be stress. Stress is basically your body's way of responding to a demand or threat that was put on the body. So a workout, technically, although that's a good thing, is basically considered as stress. When you go to your job, when you play a stressful round, also stress. When you eat, you could be putting a stress on your body, or you could be helping your body recover. So there's a ton of things that are involved in stress. All right? So, and I kind of like this picture, it's kind of a little bit blurry, but everybody knows the whole straw that broke the camel's back thing. All right? So when you start piling stress on top of stress on top of stress, what happens is it only takes one or two small little things that ends up with an injury, an illness, a sickness, and things like that. And that's why we need to recover from things like stress. So how do we recover from stress? Well, it depends. I think probably the number one answer of any question I've ever been asked in the fitness industry is it depends. Everybody recovers differently. Everybody can take stress differently. So we measure it. And I'll explain how we measure it here in a few minutes, but basically the reason I like to measure what people are doing with stress is the same reason we measure everything else, the same reason we go through assessments, the same reason we go through screens, is so we have data that we can learn from, make adjustments, and then we have data again so we can basically see if what we're doing is right or wrong. Everybody is different. And obviously that's just a whole bunch of athletes, but if you look at your entire population, everybody's different. You could have 2 athletes, 2 general population, 2 kids, and they're all going to train differently, stress differently, and recover differently. So before I get into how I measure things, I want to kind of break down, I'm going to pull all these general people into 3 populations, and hopefully this comes into what you guys watch on a regular basis. All right? What I want to do is I want to go over 3 specific groups of people and what they tend to find for stress. So, elite golfers, athletes, and even if you're not working with golfers, this is what most athletes are going to be. This is the people who basically, this is their job, to play their sport. Right? I honestly think some of the elite athletes are already doing amazing things, and I think you've seen that being here this weekend, but who I worry more about are the bubble players, the .com players, or the players that have to struggle to make it through a season. They're overtraining, they're playing every event just so they can keep up on things. But on the same side of things, they're working out, they're practicing regularly, they're competing regularly. Ideally, a lot of them are working out. But then there's other stresses involved with that, such as traveling, staying in random beds. If you're an elite athlete, you may actually be staying in a nice hotel like we are here. If you're a bubble player, you may be staying on a couch with a friend who happens to be in the town that your tournament's in. All right? Media, interviews, and there's a whole lot of other pressures that go along with getting to those tours back and forth. And not everyone has the option to eat really well when they travel. Just out of curiosity, who in here is actually working with basically PGA Tour, Web.com, long drivers, or what you would consider elite athletes? College players, high school players? Okay. So the next group of people is basically your general golf enthusiast, or if they're not a golfer, a fitness enthusiast. Completely different person, completely different stresses. All right? Now, these persons actually probably have other priorities, family, kids, dogs, lives that they have to pay attention to. So they may or may not play on a regular basis. Hopefully most of them are doing some type of workouts, but maybe not. Right? And again, they're eating whatever's available, and then they have work type stresses. It could be a deadline. It could be managing 100 people, or it could be being managed by one really jerky person. All right? There's a lot of other stresses that go into it. All right, so again, you're going to train this person, you're going to de-stress, or you're going to recover this person completely different than you would an elite athlete. So I like to believe probably almost everybody in the room probably works with this type of clientele, right? Okay. And then the last one is juniors. How many work with juniors on a fairly regular basis? All right. In an ideal situation, kids are basically eat, sleep, school, play, repeat. I wish that was the case. I am really glad that I'm not in elementary school, high school. We work with junior golfers, and to see what they go through on a regular day-to-day basis, and I have nieces that are 11, 14, 15, and to watch them on on social media freaks me out. All right, there's a whole different set of social pressures that were not on us when we were that age. All right, so that's one thing that you do have to understand. All right, so we have all these people coming into our gym, and they're at our courses, they're coming into our offices, and they're getting stressed, each of them differently. So how do we measure for that? All right. So for the most part, there's 5 different ways that I like to believe that you can actually measure for stress and recovery. Now the first one I'm not going to spend a lot of time on is basically rate of perceived exertion. All right, that's basically just asking your client how they're doing. All right. On the other side of it, that's basically what you can see out of the client. The one thing I would say about the perceived exertion is what you might perceive, especially when it comes to kids or juniors. How many of you have kids or juniors, and when you start working with them, someone will walk in the door like they just had 7 cups of coffee, running around and basically start using your gym like a playground. You know they're ready to go, they're excited. Whereas maybe a few weeks later, that same kid walks in your door all slumped over, rubbing his eyes, tired. Right? Something tells me he's not going to be the same kid in class that day or when you're working with him. All right? So I'm not really going to go over that outside of that. It is just good to basically just see how your client's doing that day. All right? And then of the last 4, blood tests, wearables, HRV monitors, grip strength, and heart rates. Those are what I'm going to spend a little bit more time on. Blood tests, this could literally be its own seminar in itself. You're going to see this a lot today, so I'm not going to go too into detail on this. Again, I'm a fitness professional, not a medical professional, but these are things I do encourage you to do. All right? And I know if you went to some of Allie's talks, or if you've seen Allie talk in the past, she promotes the same thing. There's nothing wrong with finding out what your blood is doing on a regular basis. Now, if you are getting your blood test on a regular basis, there are certain biomarkers that you can look for to see if you're overtraining and you recover more. I would probably say some of the big ones. If you do have any deficiencies, check your blood cell counts. If your testosterone is low, or if your cortisol is high, right, that's a big one right now. A lot of my general population, high stress jobs, their cortisol is high, stores belly fat. You can literally see it on them, right? And then obviously, if you have an athlete who really works out hard, if there's an increase in creatine kinase, that basically tells you that they need to recover. They need to go into their own little off season. The problem with blood tests is, despite the fact that they're extremely reliable, they may be hard to do and they're also expensive, depending on who your clientele is. So unfortunately, we may not be able to do that on a regular basis, but I would put that in the bank and actually find out if you have some places near you that people can go and get their blood test without having to get a doctor's note or a referral. So to go over the last couple, I kind of want to go back, and again, this has actually been brought up several times this weekend, is understanding the autonomic nervous system. Most importantly, sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. Right? The sympathetic nervous system is basically like a gas pedal on a car. It turns everything on. When you start to play, when you start to work out, it ramps up the heart rate, increases your heart, increases your breathing. That's what turns everything on. Now, when we measure recovery, we're actually looking at the opposite, the parasympathetic system. Right? The parasympathetic system is basically what starts to pull things back to regulatory, fight or flight response, and we can actually measure how well your parasympathetic system is working with some of these next couple of things I'm going to bring up. All right? So just kind of keep note of that as we're going through the next couple slides. And we're looking at how your body is adapting to the stress that you're putting upon it. So just out of curiosity, who here actually wears wearables? All right, and when I say wearable, it could be a Fitbit, a Garmin, a heart rate monitor, a Whoop, an Oura Ring. So actually, throw your hands up again. So wearables for I think 4 years in a row have been the #1 trend in fitness. So whether you agree with them or not, you need to understand that they're gonna be a part of what we're going through. And what it does is it allows the general population to get data the same way we get data from things like K-Vest and BodyTrack. So I would say, if you're not into them, or if you don't know about them, I would highly encourage you to start learning about them. Who here understands or has even heard of HRV, heart rate variability? All right, good. Looks like some of the same people who are on wearables. All right, so this again could be its own talk, so I'm going to break this down to the bare essentials. Heart rate variability. And what we're looking for when we measure for HRV is you actually want variability in your heart rate. All right, so ideally, a little bit of variation is actually good. That means your parasympathetic nervous system is actually adjusting and adapting well depending on what you need. So I really want to put this up here and drive that home. Higher HRV is actually healthier. It means you're physiologically ready, whereas if you have a lower, all right, you may be a little more stressed, you may not be ready to go. So if all I have to rely on is a wearable, and I can see that data, and someone comes into my gym, and their HRV is crashed, we're not going to go crazy that day. All right? We may do some more things like basically modalities and corrective work, and maybe some low-level exercises. I'm not going to hit them with power cleans, deadlifts, and explosive speed power exercises. All right? So far, so good? Heart rate. All right? Again, probably an easy one to take. You technically don't even need a wearable. All right? Ideally, the lower your heart rate, the better, to a degree. If we have some like sub 40, 45s, then we're going to bring back in medical people. But for the most part, athletes tend to have a resting heart rate of about 50 to 55 beats per minute, give or take. And when we're measuring this, I'm not measuring people to the general population. I'm measuring them to themselves. Right? So ideally, I want people to take their resting heart rate either every day or every other day, so I actually know what their trend is. So even if I have a general population person whose resting heart rate is 60 beats per minute, and after a couple long days of work, practice, sleep, a few workouts, that's now gone up to 63, 64, 65. Right? I know that they're stressed. I know their body is having to do more to allow it to recover more. So all I'm really looking at is trends with a lot of these things. Most people, when they wear wearables, they're looking for immediate responses like, what's my heart rate at? How many calories have I burned? Or how many steps have I taken? What I'm looking for is trends. I'm looking at these regularly, not just one day, one workout at a time. And then lastly, grip strength. How many of you guys actually have one of these in your gym or your medical office? Right. How many of you guys use this to actually look at recovery? Okay? This is actually a great tool. You're seeing more and more of this come out. I think most people understand that grip strength is actually a direct correlation of overall body health, right? All right. So same thing. I'm not looking for how strong their grip is that one day, all right? But if I measure their grip strength, now let's just say, for example, it's 100 pounds of pressure, day after day after day, and then again after a couple of workouts, a tense event, you test the grip again, and it's actually gone down a little bit. That doesn't mean they've gotten weaker overnight. That means their parasympathetic nervous system has not responded the way it should. So instead of hitting them with another workout and watching it drop again, I'm going to start taking advantage of that and give them some recovery. The other great thing I like about grip strength is you can actually, there's a higher correlation of upper extremity injuries when grip strength starts to decrease. Right? And again, that doesn't mean they're just weak. Right? It means their body's not recovering, which means everything's weaker. Right? So if you start hitting them with a workout where they're going to the range and just hitting ball after ball after ball, they're more susceptible to these upper extremity injuries, the tendinitises, the rotator cuff things. So again, this is good not only for recovery, but also predicting injury as well. So far, so good? Everyone still following me? All right. So these are pretty generic numbers, but I just want to give you a baseline of if I got to literally measure everything, what I'm looking for the most part. All right. So just to kind of give you a rundown, the grip strength green, HRV red, resting heart rate blue. So let's give you just a little example. So let's say, for example, this person isn't working with me. All right. This is a person who is working with some other strength coach who did not inform them about what to do. So they go into the gym. All his numbers are great, and we hit him with a killer workout. Some speed, some power stuff, Olympic lifts, deadlifts, the whole gamut. It's a great workout. He's exhausted, he's fatigued. But then he leaves that day, doesn't do any recovery, and he still feels good the next day. All right, so he ends up going to the gym on his own and liked his workout so much he decided to repeat it for a second day in a row. Hopefully that actually never happens, but you never know. Right? So after 2 days of pretty intense workouts, he may start to fatigue, and he may actually show signs of fatigue. And then because he has an event coming up, he goes to the driving range, and he's really working on this event. It's an important event. So he spends 6, 8 hours hitting balls. He hits balls for an hour or so, he plays around the golf, and then he goes back to the range and hit balls more. Right? That's still an added stress. All right? So you're going to start to, if this person was tracking, you'd start to see a decline in some of these numbers. He's adding stress and he's not adding recovery. So then what does he do? He travels down south for the event, and he gets there, he's pretty amped up for the event, so he goes to the gym, gets another workout in. I don't know if I would suggest that at this point. If someone had taught him to look at his numbers, he may not have gone to the workout. After the workout, he goes to the event, rough night of sleep, crappy bed, and he is struggling, he's grinding, he's battling. All right, he's barely at the cut number, so he wakes up the next morning, he gets to the course extra early to get some extra hits in, and because he plays so well and he went into his event fatigued, he misses the cut. So unfortunately, he's only got 2 days of the event. So what does he do? His body is gassed. If he knows anything, or if he's working with people, he should be taking the day off and doing some recovery stuff. But instead, he's frustrated that he missed a cut, so he goes back in the gym and starts working out hard again. And then finally, he comes back to his trainer or coach or medical staff, and they run some numbers on him, and they say, what the hell have you been doing the past week? He's gassed, he's crashed, all right? If someone came to me, I would feel like we should have caught this way beforehand. We should have caught this back here and prepped him accordingly to go to his event. And for someone like that, who's basically just beating themselves up day after day after day, right, it may not just be 1 day of recovery work, some body work, some corrective work. It may mean a few days of pulling back on how many balls he's hitting, pulling back on the workouts, and doing more active recovery, getting to go see a massage therapist or a physical therapist. All right? So ideally, we want to catch this stuff as it's starting to decline, not after it's crashed. This is usually where injuries happen. Make sense?
What in general is the typical decrease of the grip strength that you will put?
Everybody's different. Everybody's different. What I would say, as long as you're testing on a regular basis, you'll see any type of decrease. Right? I mean, most likely there's going to be some variations day after day. Like, I don't mind if it's a 1 or 2 pound decrease, but over a period of time, if you start to see it, you'll see a significant drop off.
Because if you put this in while back to the jump, and it's in general around 10% decrease, then you would put some recovery. So it's
Oh yeah, 10% is a big. That's a
10%.
Yep. I mean, if there's a 10% drop in grip strength, absolutely, that's a big drop. Yep, I agree. So recovery. All right. So now we know all these stresses that we're putting on people. Now we actually understand what are we supposed to be doing with these people to help them recover. All right. The first line of defense in recovery is self-care. Things that you should be teaching your clients to be doing daily. Right. Not just on off days or workouts or the days they're coming to see you. Right. Things like rest. All right. Things like Epsom salt baths, cold, hot, massage tools, things like that. All of these things can help. I would probably say that number one, as it pertains to self-care, is sleep. Right? And again, Dr. Mark Smith had a great talk on sleep the other day, and I think it's actually been brought up a couple times over the weekend. Sleep is extremely important, and one of the things that I would encourage you to do is develop a routine and try to stick to that routine as best you can, because it helps you get better quality sleep. You talked about certain rhythms and stuff that you need. I'm on the East Coast right now. I'm originally from the West Coast. All right, I know there's a 3-hour difference, so I'm actually maybe susceptible to go to bed a little bit later than I normally would. And if I can, the reason you didn't see me at the 6 o'clock workouts the other day is I want to sleep into what I'm used to for waking up, not getting up at 3 a.m. at my time. So I'm trying to stay as close to my certain time periods as possible, so that way I can stay rested, especially when I'm planning on giving a talk on a Sunday morning after being on the East Coast for 3 days. And then you can pay back a debt. Right? If you or your clients are only getting 4, 5, 6 hours a night of sleep, right, you need to give yourself an opportunity to do one of 3 things. Sleep in one day, or don't be afraid of naps. Right? Naps are okay. I avoided them at all costs when I was a kid. Now I pleasantly enjoy them fairly regularly. Track it if you can. If you have the wearables, you might as well find out how well you're sleeping. Some people, there's been nights where I get 8 hours of sleep, but I wake up feeling like crap. But now that I tracked it, I know I'm not getting good sleep, so I'm doing certain things to allow me to get better sleep. And I think everyone's heard about the whole blue light thing. And I actually had a chance to listen to
Brandon
Brandon
Marcello.
Marcello, I think a couple weeks ago at Perform Better. He gave a great talk on sleep. If you see him, feel free to pick his brain. But he talked about blue light. And the thing I got a kick about is I live in California where incandescent lights are illegal. We're not allowed to use them. But those are actually the best type of lights you're supposed to have in your house, and they have the least amount of blue light. So in California, I need to deal with these lights. Right? So despite the fact that I may or may not turn my phone off late at night or watch TV, I go into my kitchen, grab some water, I go into my bathroom, brush my teeth, take care of things, and I'm staring in a worse blue light than if I was staring at my computer screen. Right? And as you know from some of the other talks, it changes the melatonin production and actually gives you less sleep or less quality sleep. So that is something that you kind of want to know. The next line of defense after self-care is basically active recovery. Active recovery of things that you actually should be doing regularly as far as, now this is whatever you choose to do, this is completely your choice. I'm not here trying to promote products, nor am I going to try to bash a product or circumstance, but things like foam rolling, myofascial release, trigger point, stuff like that, a light workout, some mobility and some corrective day. Don't just tell people to not come to the gym. If there's a routine of going to the gym, have them go to the gym, but just make sure they're doing the right things. And I would probably say the biggest adaptation as far as active recovery is actual training adaptations, okay? Again, it's okay to have a little bit of a rest day or a down day. You do want to avoid overtraining, all right? What I would consider a low day or a down day is basically I'm not going maximal with these guys. I'm not doing power. If they need a recovery, they can still come in the gym. They can do different types of balance work, stability work, nothing that's going to tax them too much muscular, or depending on how they need to recover, it may just be some simple foam stuff. Make sure you're focusing your training. I would rather have someone go into the gym and get a quality 30-minute workout with everything that they need for that day instead of spending 3 hours in the gym. All right? Not only is there a point of diminishing return, but all you're doing is you're beating them up even more. And of the personal trainers in the room, how many of you used to think program design was probably the most important thing on the planet? Right? I went to seminars, I read books, I watched videos, I got certifications about program design, and I would sit in an evaluation with this person, and I would create this perfectly drawn out 16-week program that I was so proud of, and 2 days into it, the person would come in and say, I got like 3 hours of sleep last night, I was out drinking, I got to travel today, and I'm looking at this wonderful program that I just wrote out. We were supposed to do power cleans and deadlifts that day. Don't be afraid to throw the program out. You got to give them what they need at the time when they come in. All right. Train to fatigue. Don't train to failure. Failure is when injuries happen. All right. And I'm sure you guys have seen this before. More is not better. Better is better. Right? Better training is better than just throwing more training at them. All right. Does that make sense? Nutrition. Again. Not only has it been a talk, but it could be its own weekend. Right? Robert Yang, always great to listen to. I think we've done a really good job of complicating the heck out of nutrition. All right? Just eat real food. And I think Jason said this, Ali said this, Robert said this. If you can get people to eat real food, drink more water, and get better sleep, you're doing pretty damn good for most of your clients. All right? So just kind of be aware of it. Get your clients to understand that. Get your clients to understand what they're doing for pre and post workout. Hydration is extremely important. Coffee does not always count. Trust me, I drink probably more than anybody, but I try to drink a bunch of water as well. And then supplementation. Don't just take supplements to take supplements. Okay? Learn what your body needs and supplement accordingly. Right? That could be a whole other talk. I'm not going to get into it a lot. If you guys have questions on what I like, you can always ask me later. But nutrition is extremely important. Okay? And then one of the last phases is advanced services. Right? So now, with this list, I'm looking at the medical professionals in the room. But on the other side of it, when I look at this list, this is also a great source of potential income for a lot of people in this room. Okay? Everything on here is becoming more and more popular and more normalized. All right? When I first got into the golf fitness industry 15 years ago, right, the only people that would ever come to see us were people who were injured. Right? And now I utilize physical therapy, chiropractor, and massage therapists on a regular basis. And the problem is I have to find some of these people that will take a cash pay rate. Right? Some of my clients aren't injured. So if they're not injured, for some reason they don't think they're supposed to go to a physical therapist. I need skilled body workers. Right? You can only do so much with a foam roller, a lacrosse ball, or a Theracane. Right? Get someone who has great hand and get them to work on your client because they need that stuff. Right? So if any of you guys are medical professionals or hands-on and you're in the Sacramento area, contact me. I want as big a network as possible. All right? Some of the other things that you're starting to see become more and more popular, there's actually recovery centers opening up. Cryotherapy is becoming huge. Cryotherapy is basically a more advanced, more expensive version